3, 2, 1, and welcome back to episode 43 of Chasing the Racing. How we doing, Dom?
Yeah, right. Have you realised how unnervous we get now? It's like a marriage that's failing, isn't it?
Failing.
It's like it is, isn't it? It's like you have sex for pity. You know what I mean? It's like totally on the way out. I like that going 3, 2, 1. Who's interested? I'm lying in the lounge position. I call this the deflated Lilo look, sipping on a
the co-op tonic water.
yeah, that's it. The T without the G. Thinking, here we are, Tuesday night, rocking it. But
So we're recording a little bit earlier than usual.
I want to slip my wrists after that. That is the crappiest opening to a show ever. I do apologise. Yay! Podcasts. Hello, Chrissy. How are you?
We usually record on a Thursday night, but obviously I'm going away testing this week. We weren't planning on getting a podcast in, but we managed to get an interview sorted, which is coming your way soon.
Which is mint.
A little bit different from our usual, we've had quite a few riders and, we've had marshals and media
We've had
people.
our favourite crazy genius, Aidan Robinson, on the last one, which was awesome. Very got a lot of positive feedback on how interesting it was.
And for this is a total sort of left turn. It's not even anything to do with the racing, but obviously we have a lot of motorcycle enthusiasts and motorcycle owners that listen to the show, and so we've got a guy on from the Stolen Motorcycle Recovery London organisation.
Fish, chips, cup of tea.
Bad
food, bad breath. London.
We hear all about what they're up to, and it certainly wasn't what I expected.
Nah. When you introduce this, going, we've got these lads and they're going to recover bikes, I was expecting literally a couple of lads who have just rolled out of Franklin prison off to cause some trouble. You do, don't you? You think it almost takes a villain to stop a villain sometimes. And obviously when it comes to bike thieves, and obviously in the interview we go into heavy detail on that. But no, it was a shock. And obviously when you hear when you hear the interview, you'll definitely pick up on that. You'll be like, what the f...
And obviously I've had bikes nicked. I know what people go through, and what these lads are doing is
when you live in Durham, son, you don't want to move to Northumberland. My end, posh end, young'un, posh end.
What these lads are doing is absolutely mega. So look, that's coming that'll be coming later on in the show. Before we get to there, obviously there's been a little bit of news. We had our first proper race of the year this weekend over at Australia, Phillip Island, for the opening round of the World Superbikes. What a mega weekend of racing. I presume you haven't watched any?
No, honestly, we've hit this year running on the same platform as last year, in the fact of that you watch the race and I go to work. No, honestly, I'm not even exaggerating, ran off my feet, and obviously Timothy, get the violin out. I'm off to plead my heart here. Yeah, I just haven't had time, and I'm generally looking forward to watching it. Normally I just let you do the review because you know what you're talking about, and normally I'm like, yeah, World Superbikes, but everything on social media, and obviously to the point you rang me up on an off day, a non-podcast day, going, here, have you watched it? I'm like, nah, and he goes, and your exact words were like, if the whole season's going to be like this, it is going to be immense. So go on, throw in some spoilers for us.
Obviously, World Superbikes over the last good few years, the racing's been quite boring. And
like that marriage we were talking about at the beginning of the show, yeah.
And the series organisers have done the best to try and exciting things up, but like what we were talking about with when Whitton was on, it's been a little bit gimmicky, and they've tried different tactics.
Yeah.
But I really feel like whatever they've done for this year in terms of the rules and getting parity amongst manufacturers, and if this first round's anything to go by, then we're in for an absolute treat of a season.
So quickly, historically, how does the first round normally go?
I mean, Phillip Island's always a little bit of a one-off due to its the characteristics that it has to do with tyre wear. So with a lot of tracks, it'll just be, obviously you've got to conserve your tyres, but it's less crucial than at Phillip Island. Phillip Island's notorious for, wrecking tyres. Therefore,
is that because it's such a big? Is it like one of the biggest tracks that they go?
I presume it'll just be the makeup of the tarmac. It must be quite an abrasive circuit, and there's a lot of fast. Long sweeping corners where you're really, driving the tyre, and it'll be digging in and ripping the tyre.
Here's a very daft question, because it's one of the most coastal tracks on the meeting. Do you reckon the actual physical atmosphere has got something to do with it? What I mean by that is sand. Is that no sandpaper? You know what I mean? Like honestly, it's like I'm just wondering.
know.
I'm asking
'Cause, I
your
mean,
professional opinion, being a genius.
Qatar's in the desert, in it. So if there's an issue with sand, but
I meant physical. But at the end of the day, it's like you put sand on the track. Obviously, yes, it's going to be like theoretically less grip, but it is going to be more abrasive to the tyre. I'm just wondering that.
Is there a particular, obviously for the short circuits, the likes of Thruxton's by far the most abrasive circuit. In terms of the roads, is there a circuit that's particularly bad on tyres?
Northwest,
is it?
which is mad for a triangle, but what it is it tears out the middle of them because you're going so fast at 200 mile an hour for so long, and it's a de-acceleration. So when you're hitting the brake, it's skipping. You know, like when you've seen them all out in the Spain and not Monte Carlo.
Monte Blanco.
Monte Blanco even. Like obviously everyone's lifting up the back tyre, aren't they? Hard on the brakes. That's the exact same. So you can imagine from 200 mile an hour though, coming back down on the tyre, it literally tears chunks out of them. I think there was a photo of like Dunlop's tyre. I can't remember which brand he was on, which flavour he was on, but literally the whole middle was torn completely out of it. And it's like not particularly edge grip that makes it abrasive. It's just the sheer utter speed. When you think you're holding 200 mile an hour for a long, long time.
And one thing to do with the racing this weekend, the Super Sport race had to run a pit stop because they hadn't done. I don't know if you know, but
is that mandatory?
Yeah, I don't know if you know, but all of the categories in World Superbikes this year have to run slick tyres. So even though it's like Super Sport has always been on a treaded road tyre. Like what we run on. This year they've brought rules in, so the 300s, the Super Sport 600s, they're all on slick tyres. But even though Pirelli were confident that the slicks would go the race distance for the Super Sport, they didn't have the data to prove it. So therefore they had to, on safety grounds, they had to put a pit stop in. So after, I think it was something like 8 laps or 9 laps, the lads had to come in, change the wheel and go back out. So that added a little bit of a different element to the race.
Tyre, in your opinion, not anyone else's, in your opinion, do you think, I'm not calling Pirelli's crap tyres, but does tyre wear make more interesting racing for you? Or like imagine it, in theory, like a Dunlop, it's harder to get the heat into it, but once you've got the heat in it, they hold longer. Now the Pirellis there, it's they always
what
Pirellis. I've ridden Pirellis once, right, and it was honestly like humping Marmite. It was just like you either love it or you hate it, and that was just like it was just
really
like
you see for myself, since I've been on the BSB 125s slicks, Dunlop slicks, and then ever since I've been on a big bike, we started on Metzeler's for like a year, and then we've been on Pirellis since 2013, so I really don't know anything different.
Aye.
But what I would say is that the lap times that are done on Pirellis are unbelievable, and it's not like, I know Pirellis get a lot of flack, but it's not like club racers are then putting Dunlops in and smashing the times.
Oh no, I totally agree.
The times,
I totally agree. But even going back to that question quickly, do you think tyre wear makes more interest in racing?
Because when it depends.
They're going, oh wait. It's like we were talking about like I can't remember what grounds we were talking about. I think I was talking, pint talk in the pub. It's about like Christian Idden. He goes out and he can just smash a tyre. You know what I mean? He's so fast off the go, and it just seems the tyre goes off its edge. Now, do you think, like I say, does that make it more interesting? Because you think the tyre's not going to last, so who can preserve it? And they all talk about it.
For me, the biggest, because I've had a race when I was in Superbikes, and it was actually my best race when I was in the elite class. That was at Thruxton, and that's just a total tyre war. And basically, from getting there on Friday, it was all about who can look after the tyres the best in the race. So it was a bit. Usually, you're going out in practice and you're trying to do the fastest lap, and obviously you're thinking of your race setup, but you're predominantly looking for like getting as much grip and like going as fast as you can, basically. Where that weekend was all about you weren't like. You could do one fast lap and then your tyre would rip in half. So you needed to, maybe not that quickly, but you know what I'm saying.
I know what you mean. You can
So
destroy
anybody
a tyre
that went
very,
out,
very
anybody that pushed from the first lap in the race, ended up pitting halfway through. Like I could have probably went and taken the lead of the race for the first few laps and pulled a gap on the whole pack, but then I would have pitted. So it was all to do with tyres, and everyone was just going into the corners, lifting the tyre up, not sliding and spinning, and just keep picking the bike up and driving it out. So I mean, it adds a different element, I suppose. But at the end of the day, I think for bike racing, I think people just want to see, the fastest people going as fast as they can, or fastest bikes, fastest tyres. And I mean, years ago, there was loads of tyre manufacturers all killing each other. Where nowadays you look and all the major series have one which is mainly Pirelli, really, isn't it? Well, Pirelli do super bikes, and then obviously Bridgestone do MotoGP. Yeah,
no, it's Michelin.
Is it Michelin?
Yeah.
Michelin. So it's. I guess it takes a lot. I mean, that year that Casey Stoner won in 2007, obviously there was was it Bridgestone?
They were Bridgestones, I believe.
Is it Bridgestone or Michelin? And one of the tyres were clearly better than the other, and then the next year everyone went there. But I tell you what, I listened to one night we had Colin Edwards at the club, and he was talking about this, and he was saying how he prefers when there was different tyre manufacturers all competing, because say if you were on, for example, everyone is on. Did you say Michelin's now? Or
MotoGP.
Yeah, they're all on
even
Michelin's.
The Moto3 lads.
One of the bikes might work really well on Bridgestones, and their chassis they get the best out of Bridgestone tyres. So they're basically getting handicapped to work with something that their chassis doesn't. They don't want to. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh no, I know exactly what you're saying.
Where you could choose your tyre and work with the manufacturer around the chassis, and there was that element of competition. But yeah, it's hard to say. I mean,
because that's the thing that annoys me, especially in the sport, and the only way you develop in any sport, not just motorcycle racing, is that certain people do get different tyres. That is fact. You know what I mean? Like the development tyres. You know what I mean? And it's mad because pretty much the privateer section you get, that's off the shelf, son. Off you go and go as hard as you can.
So, do you know when you go to the TT, do you run Dunlops?
Yep, Dunlops.
Okay. And because you see, do you know the night that I was interviewing Hutchie, I was asking him about tyres, and he said that, I can't remember exactly his tally, but his wins on the different tyre manufacturers are virtually equal. I think he's won something like 8 TTs on Metzeler's and 8 on Dunlops.
Yeah.
So he was basically saying he wasn't saying it was irrelevant, but he was kind of saying, I've won on both, so I
can say that it's like you're saying about personal preference on the motorcycle, but what I'm saying is these top lads do get different tyres.
At road racing.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the way they construct and everything.
What, as in better tyres?
Yeah. Well, development tyres, so go off, try that and see what you think, but then the rest of us get different, we get
what you pay for.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So I pay my own tyre bill and everything like that, and you just right, there you go. You don't they get different constructs.
Is that a conspiracy, or is that 100% fact?
No, that's fact.
Really?
Why do you think the hot change them in the pits?
What does that mean?
Basically they're going out and the Dunlop lads take the tyres away, but that's how the sport develops. I'm not going, oh, woe is me, picking on me. No, that's how the sport's developed. You've got to get the fastest lads on the tyres to push them.
For example, Dunlop at the TT, which riders get special tyres?
Well, the fast lads.
Like
Hickman, Harris, they will do. Of course they will. Even Metzeler will be doing it. You know what I mean? Not everyone's getting the same time. They've got to be constructed different for the TT. They've got to be harder down the middle. And obviously, you go down the road, you keep your C on the left, so you're mainly going right. So the right-hand tyre is a bit harder. But then that does eventually filter down.
Yeah. But
the mad thing is, you need this sport. You need the money and you need the infrastructure to go off the go. That's the thing, and obviously building it up. And lucky for me, it's a case of I'm slowly, steadily building up. And now Davies Motorsport will come on board, and I've had people help me, and I've still got people help me now, and just people are starting to get up, and that gets you those little bit better. You get a few more ponies, you get a few more tyres, you get this, but no, it's all about development. So tyres is a huge factor. How the hell did we end up talking about tyres?
I don't know. Well, I was just about to say I don't want it to be a spoiler alert, but if you haven't watched the World Superbikes already, maybe mute this and then go and watch it and then put us back on. But it was great. Yeah, take your headphones off.
I'm going to go just play on my phone for a second here.
It was mega racing. I'll just get the results up. So the race 1, which was... so it's on Saturday there, but obviously it was with the time difference, it was really late, either late at night or early in the morning. I can't remember. Top Rack took the win ahead of Alex Lowe's and Scott Redden. And then Michael van der Mark was just behind, just missed out on the podium. He was so unlucky because he was fighting for the win the whole race, and he was nothing behind the winner, but he was off the podium. Mega race, dead tight. The big news from race 1 was that Johnny Ray crashed. So I think he was trying to go around the outside of Tom Sykes, and they had a little bit of a coming together around a fast left-hander. And Johnny ran off, got back on the track, and then when he was making his way back through, he knocked into Caricasulo and set his airbag off. So as he was passing, he knocked into him.
Hold on, in World Superbikes, you can get back on the bike and join the race.
He didn't... he went off track.
Got you.
Then came back on, working his way through, smashed into Caricasulo, set his airbag off when he was still on the bike, and then later on Johnny crashed, trying to catch back up. So obviously, I'm a big Johnny Ray fan as it is.
He's phenomenal.
However, after winning 5 titles in a row, it's for the interests of the competition. It's kind of good that he started on a back foot a little bit, because it's makes things a bit more exciting. Then I had the sprint race, or I think they call Super Pole race or something, the shortened race. Johnny came back and won that, which was good to see.
I was about to say that.
Top Rack second, and Scott Redden back on the podium in third. And then
Scott's going well then.
Obviously, he was in that leading pack. He's a bit of a slow starter, so off the grid he usually drops down to about 6th or 7th, and he's very chilled first few laps, and then just picks his way through.
Tyre wear.
And he was in the battle all weekend. And then race 2, another fantastic race, and Alex Lowe's took his first win on his first weekend on the Kawasaki.
He was dead far down in practice.
He was nowhere in testing, and it just goes to show, all this testing times and this and that.
Says the man going testing.
Yeah, Alex was nowhere in testing and just keeping his powder dry, getting ready for the race weekend, and then he's leading the World Championship by quite some margin. It was phenomenal to see. So Alex won ahead of Johnny Ray and Scott Redden. So Scott Redden was on the podium in every race, and nice and consistent start. And I would say the other things to mention, the BMWs were strong in testing, especially Tom Sykes, but had a bit of a disappointing weekend. Loris Baz was very spectacular to watch. Baz was up in the fight for the wins all weekend, but he was a bit unlucky, I would say. Top Rack was really unlucky in race 2. He had a mechanical, so he was actually leading the championship at the time, but he had a mechanical DNF. Other things to mention, Bautista was got the fastest speed trap of the weekend at 203 miles an hour on that new Honda, so it's clearly got
I was
some
about
ponies.
to say, that's what I'm interested in, because obviously that's the only new thing on the grid, isn't it?
I think the issue is it's got a little bit too much power, and
Shut up, man.
they're having problems dialing it in and making it rideable power. I was listening to Eurosport do a podcast called Full Throttle. Yeah, Full Throttle podcast.
You're about to say if I ever... No, I
Whittam was did quite a detailed analysis on basically the construct of the new engine. It revs really high. I think it revs to something like 16,000. And
what does the ZX10 do? 14 and 8?
Something like that. But I think it's very peaky power, so the power comes in at the last sort of 5,000-6,000. But yeah, I think next track to go to is big straight, so maybe it'll help the Honda, and might see.
With the whinging about usable power, Jesus.
Haslam was pretty competitive over the weekend. He had a crash he actually took, who was it? He knocked somebody off in, was it Cortese?
God.
I can't actually remember who he knocked off, but he knocked somebody off, went down himself, but other than that, he was, first race, he wasn't that far behind the leaders, in that sort of group. And yeah, he looks okay.
Very good.
And I think that's basically my roundup of World Superbikes. Locatelli was amazing in
Who?
World Supersport. He absolutely annihilated the race. And
How did Danny Webb get on? Being our Brit, is he the only
I think
Briton?
when I was
in
following
World
it, I think
Supersport?
he was about 13th. I presume he finished around that, which isn't bad.
Hey,
Points in
new
his
team
first.
and new,
That's
he's
it.
back at it. And
It's good to see James Toslin back in the paddock as
There we
his
are.
team manager. So it'll be we'll keep an eye on how they're getting on.
Hopes. Yes, the British hopes.
But yeah, Locatelli's just come over from Moto2. He had a really disappointing year in Moto2 last year. I think he was like 28th or something. He turned up in World Supersport and absolutely smashed it in his first race. And that
It shows the class, doesn't it?
it shows the class of Moto2. The strength of that field. The people that are he's been literally nowhere in Moto2 over the last 2 seasons, and then just turns up and. It's not like he pipped the win as well. He annihilated all testing and then went out and smoked everyone in the race. So, maybe, you could say he really suits the bike or this or that, but it's looking like it's going to be difficult to beat. Other than that, BSB have been over to Jerez for the BSB test. Josh Brooks was fastest there by quite a decent margin ahead of Bridewell. And then it was kind of the order that you would sort of expect, I would say. Vickers has shown strongly after a really disappointing end to last year, especially at Brands Hatch. He's came out fighting and testing, it's looking like he's going to have a strong start to the season, I would say. Storm Stacey for his debut did very well. He was
because we were saying that in the last pod, weren't we? So there's still testing's been ongoing from last week as well, so it's been a long old time. But even let's jump back a subject to Ducatis here. Michael Dunlop, the cat amongst the pigeons, mind.
We've been saying a while how much we would like to see the V4 at the Isle of Man TT, and obviously
when John got announced, we were like, that's it. And obviously you and me being the owners of Rumour Mill, you know what I mean? Did you see that coming?
We've been saying for a while what's the likes of Hutchie hasn't announced anything on a big bike. Dunlop hasn't announced anything on a big bike. We're waiting, but to be honest, I was expecting Dunlop to go to Bill Base, to be honest.
I kind of saw that as a safety net kind of thing, and it's a bit like
or run himself or Taz
that's it. Hold on, why Bill Base and Taz weren't at the test? Do they normally just drop out?
I think Bill Base usually do the UK tests, so do a few UK track days. They were actually out in Cartagena about a month ago or so with Keith Farmer and Kyle Rice.
Also were, yes.
I don't think they've got a Superstock rider lined up yet. I don't know if they've got plans to announce something. But I was surprised to see Taz not there. Obviously, they've got Bradley Ray and Taylor McKenzie on board for this year. And with them, especially Brad being new to the BMW and...
Of course, Taylor's got a bit of experience on them, on the BM side of things anyway.
I've seen Brad was out in Spain, but I think just doing a private Cartagena test maybe by himself or something. But interesting one. And to be honest, I haven't heard much from Taz. I know what you mean. They're very quiet.
They're very much in the same camp as what Dunlop was, but obviously Paul Bird is he's I don't know how the deal came about, how they've kept it quiet. I honestly, when that news came out, I did not see that. Not even a remote glimpse in my mind thought of that. Mm-hmm. But when it's come together, brilliant. Because let's be honest, if there's anyone who can handle that power around the TT course, it is going to be Michael Dunlop. I don't care if you're... Because you think, Hickman's a creature comfort and so is Dean Harrison. Mm-hmm. Why fix something that's not broke? Dean Harrison can make the Kawasaki work. Pete Hickman can make the BMs work. So you put the only bike that Michael Dunlop couldn't get to work, and I think he's obviously, I think it goes into quite a fair bit of detail about how the bike was, if you know what I mean, was the Yamaha. It was the Yamaha 1. But the thing about Michael Dunlop is he does not give a flying shite. It's brilliant. He wants to win. So when Michael makes a decision, there's a reason, and I think that's why so many people respect him. Like, Michael Dunlop is a Dunlop, and that name will echo through eternity of motorcycle racing as long as there's 2 wheels and a petrol engine. But Michael Dunlop is very much Michael Dunlop, and I'm generally excited to see him on this bike. From an
inside view, obviously, from competing against Michael and the rest of the lads, could you see him taking it to the likes of Hickman and Harrison at the TT this year? on the Ducati.
Yeah, I can. I think Michael, if he gets, which you see, Paul Bird doesn't. Thing is, you've got two lads, extremely determined lads.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Bird just, I've never met the man personally, but you can tell from his persona, on and off the track, that look, I'm here to win, son. And Michael Dunlop's not turning up to just for a little bit of cheddar. He's turning up going here, and he knows he must have sat down and gone, right, what's the bike that can beat these two?
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
I did my best to get Paul on the podcast. I sent him a little message, but he just said the interviews aren't really his thing, but he wished us both the best for our seasons, and obviously I reciprocated it. And
fair play, man, because he didn't have to reply at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Busy lad and everything like that. I get stuff, you a couple of Geordie Ballons, you know what I mean? It could have been simple as that, couldn't it? But no, fair play though. We took the time to actually no, I'm not coming on, which is fair enough. Busy people.
I was speaking to one of my pals last night.
I'm your only mate. Don't you lie about that.
Ali Roland Rouse, and he's somebody that I would love to get on the podcast, and I'm determined to get him on at some time, because his technical knowledge is second to none, and he was talking to us about loads of sort of tech things that are going on in the sport at the moment. And I'm not going to say anything now, because I want to get him on and he can talk about it. But I think it'd be a great guest to get on soon. But obviously we'll get this interview on. Have you got anything else you would like to say beforehand?
Don't steal bikes, because these lads will be chasing you.
So over to the Stolen Motorcycle Recovery London, and I was
London.
I was going to say is what did we say? Not trade name, the thingy name,
but stage name.
We'll leave it till the podcast.
Right,
so
let's crack on, son. Let's
over
crack
for
on.
the interview. So I'm so excited to be finally having this interview. I've been trying to line it up for quite some time now, and I first got introduced to your page on Twitter and Facebook when I was actually down at Brands Hatch, and my ped, like my paddock scooter, was stolen.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
Recommended towards your pages. But welcome, a representative from the Stolen Motorcycle Recovery London group, and welcome to Chasing the Racing. First of all,
having us.
For the people that maybe haven't heard of you, do you want to just give a quick outline of who you are and what your organisation does?
Yeah, so we're two bikers in London. About a year ago, we were quite frustrated at the fact that nobody seemed to be doing anything about sort of bike theft. And like everybody sort of say, well, it's really easy. The police could be doing a lot more. Somebody sort of told us, well, what are you guys doing to help? And we thought, it's a good point. And then just cracked on, basically. So we identify, locate, secure and recover stolen motorcycles back to their owners free of charge. So we started off, it was pretty humble at the beginning in terms of, renting a zip van and sort of getting peds that had been dumped and stuff. And it grew quite quickly in terms of just the network that we've built of people around the city. So it works principally on that people see motorbikes that look a bit out of place, they'll report them to us, and we'll sort of take the hassle out of it. So once it's reported to us, we'll do some checks on it. If it is stolen, we try and get a van out as soon as possible, recover the bike, take it back to the owner's address. So it's a pretty simple concept, but it seems to be working fairly well. We've done just under a year, we've done just under 200 bikes. Ranging from tiny little 50cc peds all the way up to sort of GS 1250s, Ducatis. So it's a bit of a. We've done a few cars as well. We didn't set out to find them, but we just sort of spotted them on the way and thought, well, we might as well. So no, it's been quite a fun journey. It's taken quite a lot of time, but it's been a good laugh.
Right, may I just say hello, by the way? Obviously, we
hi.
haven't got this man's name. Obviously, you want to keep a nominal. Would you like a stage name? Have you thought of a stage name before you come on the podcast?
Not yet.
Because not all heroes wear capes, son. And by the sounds of it, you sound like the people's hero. So go on, give yourself a stage name quickly, so our audience can relate.
I've got no. You give me a stage name. How about that?
You're
the creative ones.
No, we're a couple of knackers from the northeast, son. I'm just glad you're down in London. But can I just say, right, when obviously Chrissy said, look, I've got this amazing guest lined up, a pair of lads, they go and recover motorbikes back from people. Now, I bet you get this all the time, but your voice has literally shocked me. You know what I mean? I feel like I would introduce you to my own mother. I was expecting like some bloke inhaling like on a tab, like, fuck off, you little. You know what I mean? Like,
that's the other one. You haven't met the other one. That's the problem.
Right. Is that why he's quiet? Is he braying some gypsy who's nicked a bike at the moment?
Yeah, well, he can't talk. That's the problem. We just feed him raw meat and he cracks on. So, no, I think one of our strengths is that we're not what you expect. So when we're roaming around in your estate at 2 a.m, you don't assume. You don't know who we are, and you just let us crack on with things. And by the time you've realised that we're there to get your bikes, we're long gone. So I think it's been quite helpful. And it also means that we can, if you came across like a bunch of wrong-uns, then every time the police see us, they would pull us over.
Wrong-un. It's brilliant. Yeah. You are just so simplifying criminal activity. You know what I mean? Oh, you're naughty boy. Stop nicking bikes.
At the end of the day, a lot of the guys, I think, when you look on sort of Facebook, a lot of people go around sort of saying, oh, it's these guys carrying acid and they'll kill you for your bike. When the reality is a lot of them are just complete muppets, idiots. And it kind of... To us, I think we think it's quite important to remind people that these guys are cretins and they're not hardened criminals. There are, small gangs that will go out and kind of commit violence, but a lot of them are just, if they had a real job, they'd get lost on the way to work every day because they're that stupid. So, we think it's quite useful and that's kind of why we have we try and have quite a big social media presence, is that we can kind of, it's showing that people are fighting back, and that, all these guys who are nicking bikes in London will follow our social media and they get upset when we post the bikes that they'd stolen. I've had a couple actually message us going, oh, you took this bike off us. And I said, well, yeah, but we're coming for the other ones. Don't worry.
The mad thing is, like, to be honest, like from the way it's portrayed, especially in the northeast here, it's like anyone that nicks a bike, it's used for violent crime. Is that not fair to say, Chris? You know what I mean? They're going robbing banks, knocking grannies over, stealing this, stealing that, and immediately it doesn't sound like just naughty muppets nicking bikes. It actually, from the news's point of view, it actually sounds like hardened criminals. So to be fair, it's definitely portrayed in a massively different way on the media platforms.
Well, there's a bit of a sort of cynical point in that the Met Police. So we've got a relatively, I'll say, good relationship with the Met Police, although not officially, and they've done a lot of work on kind of moped-enabled crime, so that the criminal gangs that were robbing places with bikes, and basically they were stealing bikes and then committing further crime. And the Met have achieved a massive reduction in that because literally these were kind of we'd identified half the guys at the same time because they're well-known, pretty stupid gangs. So they've all been locked up, and I think we're trying to maintain this message that it's the same people because it basically makes everybody look really good. The fact is, in London, nobody's investigating nicked bikes. Most the victims we deal with, the first contact they have with a human after their bike's been nicked is us. So they'll report it to the Met online. They'll get no phone call. Nobody will visit them. And then a few days later, they'll get a letter saying we've closed the case, because it's massively difficult for the police to deploy resources against bike theft gangs because they're relatively unknown. They're not committing what the police would call violent or serious crime. So they kind of go unaffected by the police. We see a lot of these gangs where every day they're out nicking bikes. Everybody knows who they are. All their neighbours, local scrotes, and nobody's doing anything about it because it's just not worth people's time. And it causes the impact on the victims is massive. Most of the people we deal with don't have theft insurance or don't have good theft insurance. So by the time your bike's been nicked, you're down, 4 or 5 grand, and you'll never get that back. And you kind of it's quite hard to explain to people that aren't bikers what the attachment is between a rider and a bike. If my car got nicked tomorrow, I probably wouldn't really care. Whereas if the bike got nicked, it would be devastating. So, I think a lot of these gangs, there's real interest in kind of linking the moped-enabled gangs with the theft gangs, because the police can say, well, we're doing a lot about it. But in reality, I think the latest stats is there's been a drop of 13% in thefts between 2018 and 2019. 13% ain't that great. It's because in London, moped-enabled criminality was 2 or 3 gangs, and once they got locked up, that tanked. But the thefts in London have stayed pretty static. I was speaking to some people in the industry the other day, and all of them told me that they felt it had gone up. The reports we saw over the winter was that the figures were going up. It's depressing, because we sort of thought, well, this winter is going to be great. We can sort of kick back and have a few months off, and it was just manic. It was worse than the summer. So it's constant, and nothing's changing really.
I was actually going to ask you about your relationship with the police, because obviously you are kind of doing. If they had more resources, it's like kind of what they should really be doing. And obviously if you turn up and say recover a stolen bike, it's like to the police's eyes, like they must have a lot of trust in you, because essentially you're then handling stolen goods, so they must have some sort of relationship with you where that the you can't then be done for handling. Am I right there, or what?
Yeah, so basically, so for handling stolen goods, and this is kind of the legal minute, but for handling stolen goods, you need to demonstrate intent. So you need to intend to deprive the owner. Every time we lift a bike, the first thing we do, that bike does not go in our van before we've called the Met and told them, we have taken this bike, and they know that nothing wrong is going to happen. So that the relationship with the Met, basically with the officers, with individuals within the Met, it's a fantastic relationship. We get a lot of help. The official relationship with the Met is kind of that, I don't know if you've seen Hot Fuzz, but it's kind of that you're making us all look bad, and the leadership of the Met don't really want to deal with us. We've had meetings at pretty senior levels, and they just weren't interested. And I can see their point. In London's kind of one of those forces where it's the biggest force in the country, and then every single journalist is waiting to pounce on them. That if they do anything wrong, and I can see the headlines. If anything happened, police-backed vigilante kills unarmed teenager. I can just see the headline in advance, and I can understand why the Met don't want to get involved, because if anything did go wrong, they would have to explain that they trusted 2 blokes with a van to, in partnership with the Met, go into dangerous areas. So,
hold up, whoa! I've just discovered your stage name. I've just thought of it. Right now, you two can fight it over. No, it's Batman and Robin. So it's up to you two to figure out who's Batman and who's Robin. Now you've got a direct court. You've got the commissioner's got a red phone. You know what I mean? Ringing Batman, like a stolen motorcycle's lit up in the sky. This is gonna be amazing, isn't it? You know what I mean?
To be fair, but yeah, Batman and Robin works as well.
Totally, Batman and Robin. You know what I mean? You can either be like the Heath Ledger era, you know what I mean, or you could be like the '60s Lycra. It's totally up to you. This is your stage name. It's totally up to you.
Yeah, there'll be reports of 2 weirdos roaming around London at night in Lycra. But
you touched on going into dangerous situations, and obviously these criminals who are not they're not scared to steal bikes, so they're obviously dabble in other criminal activities. You're obviously putting yourselves at massive risk going to essentially take. I know it's not their property, but obviously once they've stolen it, they kind of see it as theirs. So you must like what Dom was saying when I first spoke to you. I was kind of thinking you two must be 6'5", jiu-jitsu, meatheads that are going in and terrify. But I mean, you must go get into some really sticky situations, and do you ever come face to face with the thieves?
So I guess it's quite important to kind of. So for starters, we're in a sort of 3.5 ton van. So not many people will pick a fight with a 3.5 ton van because you're going to lose. The other thing is, I mean, a lot of these bikes, we say we go into estates. We'll do the odd estate here and there when we've got fairly good intel and take bikes. But most of the time, these bikes are stolen. They're parked up in nice areas because if you park up, I don't know, S1000 RR in a shithole, the first police car that goes past will go, that's nicked. So you'd park it in a nice area down the road from where you live. And a lot of the bikes we find are actually in, pretty nice areas where every neighbour assumes that another neighbour's just bought a new bike and nobody really checks it. So a lot of it is fairly safe. I mean, we obviously we carry sort of bulletproof vests, so we try and keep those on the down low when we're out and about. Just so.
Have you ever had a proper violent attack? You must have.
Violent.
Yeah, go on.
I wouldn't say violent, but only 2 weeks ago we were in an estate down in where was it? Sort of Greenwich area, picking up brand new T-Max that had been stashed away in an estate, and we thought, well, we're going to have to come up with a plan here to get the police here, just because no matter what direction we take to get the bike to the van, there's about 1,000 people can see us, from their windows. And as we're sort of sitting there in the car formulating this great plan, about 7 guys rock up, walk past us into where the bike was hidden. And we sort of didn't, we thought shit, so we called the police and said, look, if you can kind of, show up sharpish, it'd be quite helpful, just because we'd rather not have to chase these guys around London. I mean, the bike had a tracker on it, so they weren't really going to get very far. But and then minutes later, Robin tapped me on the shoulder and went, oh, they're fucking nicking that bike again. And they were trying to hide it, pushing it out of the estate. But again, it's, a lot of people, if they're moving a bike or with a nicked bike and they see us rock up, I think a lot of the time they just want to put as much distance between them and the stolen vehicle. They don't really care they don't stop and ask questions about who we are. And I think to them, it's probably quite shocking to see people rock up who are after the same vehicle that they're, nicking. So normally what will happen is we'll show up, they'll see people they don't recognize, looking a bit out of place, and they'll just leg it and dump the bike. That being said, we try and kind of make sure that they realize that we're not there necessarily for them. If we were there for them, that would make us vigilantes. We've never detained anybody. We've never kind of confronted somebody. But on the other hand, if we rock up and there's 2 guys pushing the bike that we're after, we would try our best to get them just to dump it and run before we collect it. The last thing we want to do is get ourselves, into a situation where somebody pulls a knife or pulls a gun or whatever in some estates. For us, it's not really worth it. We're not, if we were getting paid 50 grand a bike, I'd say, well, you measure that risk. But for us, it's kind of, a lot of these bikes will pop up again. So if we see a bike, just the other day we saw a bike, we thought, we're going to have that. And it was being ridden around. And then sort of 2 days later, we found it parked up and had it. So a lot of the time, if the intelligence is good and we kind of know the areas, then there's no real point in us, going face to face, because we can just wait for them to go to bed and then take the bike away. So, and I think the psychology of taking the bikes when they're not there is bigger, because they get back, they'll get up at midday and head out to get their bike and go and meet their mates, and the bike's gone. And to me, that's got a much bigger psychological impact to them than trying to bring violence into the equation, if that makes sense.
I totally agree. Now, the good thing about this podcast is it's a motorcycle podcast, and let's be honest, everyone who listens to this has a relationship with adrenaline.
Yeah.
Like now, you obviously you're passionate bikers, the pair of you, right? So have you quick question? You ever done a track day?
No, because I would look terrible in leathers.
All right, fair enough. No, I'm just trying to put a correspondent, because like me and Chrissy race motorcycles and the adrenaline buzz you get off that. But I tell you what, if someone was nicking me Dora the Explorer scooter out the front, it would be like your heart would be going through the roof, and is that adrenaline still there, or do because I think I'm going to be very honest, you borderline downplayed punching jippos in the face, and that's quite a high end. We've all seen the film Snatch, and we know how heavy it can get. Never punch Gorgeous George. You know what I mean? It's one of those.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think
that relationship you must have with adrenaline must be intense if you're doing this nightly.
Yeah, I think that often it's when we're in somewhere. We've been to a lot of places where if we were spotted, within minutes you get 10 guys coming out of a building, and it's kind of quite good fun to say, right, well, you're trying to be as quiet as possible, and then suddenly one of you will do something stupid and you both start laughing. And a lot of the time it's kind of let's try and mitigate the risk as much as possible, but it's also good, I always think, to kind of understand what the risks are. And to us, I mean, I think we still do get the adrenaline rush, and I think it's the satisfaction you get out of it is massive as well. So I've had kind of grown men break down crying when you bring their bike back to them, and to me it's kind of those people that we've helped, and you can see there a lot of them put reviews on our sort of Facebook page, and to us I think the satisfaction of just seeing how we've made a shitty situation for them good. And we've shown them that not everybody's out to get you, and I think that's that we derive massive satisfaction from that.
Fantastic. Not even.
And obviously when you go and collect these bikes, like for instance, if a bike has a tracker on, so you know exactly where it is, you go to the house. How do you, like for instance, if you know that it's in somebody's shed or somebody's garage, do you just wait until the early hours of the morning and then go in and get it, or do you only get them if they're on the street?
So we'd never we'd never try and gain access to
someone's
property.
bike just being pinched on your phone there.
I think it is actually linked to that as well. I'm getting I've just
we're getting a live feed here, Chrissy.
An 18-plate moped in Streatham. So but no, we would never kind of go onto private property to get a bike. So it's never happened before. The one time, so we had a tracked bike that was in Isle of Dogs E14, and I headed down on my own, and I thought it'll be quite easy. It'll be like an underground car park or something. We'll find it. We'll get the owner to come and collect it, and kind of went round this estate and couldn't spot it. And I thought, I'll call the police. It's Monday evening. They'll be happy to help. And literally like 6 minutes after, these two coppers show up to help, and we searched everywhere it could be around there. No luck. And then as we're kind of deciding that, I don't know what's happened, we go past there's this sort of abandoned office building, and there were oil tracks on the ground, strong smell of fuel, and it was a pretty clear ping to that building. So we thought, well, actually it does make sense that it would be in here, and kind of within a fairly short amount of time made a decision that we had legal grounds or the police had legal grounds to gain entry. Once I'd explained to them that the tech is never wrong, they kind of came back with a battering ram, and we had to go on the front. Couldn't get through the front because they were kind of big, heavy doors. Went through the back, and there was a fairly small safer transport officer. I thought I'll let him go in first because there's a huge mountain of stuff to get over before you get into the room we were after. I thought I'll let him go first just because he looks a lot lighter than me, so he won't fall through anything. And he sort of came back and said, you need to get in and see this. And we got in, and there was like a commercial garage inside this old abandoned office block. And sure enough, so the BMW S1000RR we were after was hidden inside. And it was literally just probably 60-70 grand's worth of expensive bicycles, loads of bikes, frames,
gold mine.
Yeah, and it I just remember we got there. It must have been sort of 6-7 p.m. and I remember leaving, and it was probably 3:30. And I was just thinking, God, this is manic, And we got the owner's bike back. Some of the frames that were there. So it's quite funny actually, because as we walked in, so there was still rap music playing on this big projector. The guy's blunt was in the ashtray, still smoking. And I checked. He had a text. He'd left his phone because basically he heard us.
Hold on. Did you read Snoop Dogg by any chance?
No. I don't, well, no. He was
Chris,
right. But on his phone, it was quite funny. I'll always remember there was a text, unread text, and it went, "Bro, we need to get rid of these frames because the police can trace them." And I was like, "Well, it's too late, game over." And what was quite funny is that we then found out who. So this building belonged to this like charity. I won't name them, but it's this kind of hippie community down in Isle of Dogs, and they've got this really kind of arrogant statement on their website where they were saying, "Oh, we spoke to all the local kids and they were stealing these bikes because they wanted to fix their own bikes, and basically taking the blame away from the guys nicking the bikes." And they said, "Oh, we asked them, if we offer you a space to do this legally, would you stop nicking bikes?" And sure enough, they did. And you think, no, they didn't. You gave a commercial garage and they then used that as a chop shop, and made a lot of money. And a couple of weeks later, the place was just abandoned. We seized quite a lot that night in terms of bikes that there was enough indication that those bikes were ringers or were on false identity, so they got seized. They've never been reclaimed, because the guys knew that if they claimed them, they'd probably get nicked. It is going to court at some point, so that it has been submitted for court, but we'll see what happens. So no, stuff like that is pretty satisfying. During the summer, we had one weekend. And this is quite a good story as well, actually, if we've got time. But we went into this estate in Hackney, quite a nice estate, actually. And we got there and we were after, there was a KTM, I think it was a 990 Adventure, so not a brand new one, had been parked up. So we get there and we start running a check, and it's got a French number plate. So we get it checked out and it's confirmed stolen. So I'm waiting for the van to arrive. And as I'm standing there, these two guys, that look really legit, walk past. And I sort of said, "Oh, how long's this bike been here for?" And he said, "Oh, a couple of days, but the estate's full of bikes." I said, "Oh, okay. Where are the other ones?" So we start loading up this KTM into the van, and then this guy sort of taking me around the estate, pointing out all the nicked bikes, and it was, first one was a nicked moped. I thought, okay, it's a 19 or 18 plate, it's good result. And then we go to the next one, and it's a Ducati 1200 Stripe, I lifted the cover. I thought, bloody hell. So we ended up calling it in, and I said, "Look, just I don't care who they are, just send 2 officers to come and stand and look pretty while we do this, so that the guys who've nicked these don't come and try and get them back." And we ended up, it was a 990 Adventure. There was a GS 1200. So both bikes belonged to French tourists who were visiting London, and on their first day in London, they parked them up in Hackney and they got nicked. So we were able to we got the KTM fixed because they'd broken the barrel. We got that fixed, and the two of them flew over to pick up their bikes. And they sent me, like, every couple of hours, they would send me a picture on their journey home, and it was kind of them kissing the ground on the ferry, them getting back to France, and sort of all their ride home. But things like that is kind of, to us is what it's all about. It's people that came to London and saw the worst part of London and thought, "Oh, well, the whole place is shit," and left. And actually you said, well, no, actually, for every scumbag criminal out there are people that are trying to help. And I think the biking community, that's what it's all about. If I see another bike parked up on the side of the road and a guy next to it, 9 times out of 10 I'll stop and check that they're okay. And I think that's what being a biker is all about. So I think this is just an extension of that. It's kind of saying, well, we can actually have a massive impact on these people, so let's give it our best shot.
Mm. And I've noticed on your social media, obviously, for people listening, you're on Facebook as, is it just Stolen Motorcycle Recovery London?
Yeah.
And also on Twitter?
It's at stolen_London. What else have we got? We've got a website. So basically the way we try and operate now, our preferred way of operating is the website's smrl.org.uk, and what it allows people to do is it allows them to submit a report when their bike is stolen. And what that does is it gives us all their details, and it gives us authority to lift the bike, so that if we spot it, we're not spending 45 minutes waiting for the Met to contact the owner. We've got that direct line of communication straight away.
Fabulous.
It's quite helpful because it just means we've had weekends where if we didn't have to wait around, we could have done 12 bikes, and instead we had to do 8 because we're sitting there going, sometimes you have to wait for hours depending on which area of London you're in. So we try and push people towards the website, our social media. I mean, the Twitter, we try and not take ourselves too seriously on Twitter and Facebook. Try and have a bit of a laugh with things, but the audience is growing. People sort of send us. We do get odd things sent our way as well. People lose bicycles and they send it to us, and you think, well, what do you expect us to do? We used to have what number plate. We get, we had a guy recently who contacted us, and he had a pretty distinctive sort of BMW C1 moped, and he said, I've checked the area. So we headed down, we met him, and it was literally within 5 minutes of telling him we'd have a look, we were calling him back saying, we found it around the corner. A lot of these bikes are found quite close to where they're stolen. I don't know how it works. It's probably the same in most parts of the UK, but London, the approach is normally you break the steering lock, you get any locks off the bike, and then you push it using a moped up to about a mile away, and then you park it up in a bay or somewhere that looks okay, and you give it a couple of days, because that means you'll know straight away if it's got a tracker or not, because if it's got a tracker, it won't be there when you come back and get it. So a lot of the times we try and sort of sit down with a map, a location of all the estates. We try and figure out which direction those bikes have gone, and then we try and basically trace their steps back. And a lot of the time it works because they're not very creative. So, we straight away which direction they're going to take. Find a lot that way, so it works.
And I've also noticed on your Twitter, obviously you run a donations thing on PayPal. Do you want to just explain that for our listeners if they're interested?
Yeah. So we were initially funded, as in we got £1,000 when we started from the Motorcycle Action Group. We're massively grateful that they decided to support us. Our ongoing costs, we kind of refer to them as cheap but expensive. So we're much cheaper than if any government entity was doing this, because the only real cost we have is our sort of insurance, diesel, that sort of thing. We never take any money out.
Vests.
Yeah, so the basic equipment is all funded through donations. We have a basic understanding that we never take money for our time. So if we spend a whole night on this, we would never say, okay, well, we deserve £100 each. The money always stays in the group, and we basically use it for the sort of running costs, website costs, all those sort of things add up quite quickly. So it's a PayPal.me link, and I think it's PayPal.me/SMR London, but it's on the website. So we try and plaster those links all over the place, and people do donate. It's always quite tricky because you're trying to keep something running without a sort of guaranteed monthly income. But on the other hand, we've found that whenever we've been really desperate or something's happened and we need people's help, they've always stepped up and they're always ready to help. So we're massively grateful that the community trusts us enough to they're giving us their hard-earned money. It's quite difficult to do. It's not often that you donate to causes. You'll give a few quid here and there, but we found that the people that are generous to us are very generous, and they trust us to kind of take that and use it for good cause. So we're massively grateful for the people that support us. We couldn't do it without them.
Well, fantastic. And just another question that I was wondering that I was going to ask you. Obviously, it's your sort of area of expertise, tracking stolen motorcycles. I was just wondering if you had a recommendation for a particular type of tracker. Obviously, a lot of our audience have motorcycles or like have teams or whatever, and like from your obviously you're tracking bikes all the time, so I presume you'll know the best sort of devices.
I mean, am I allowed
what would you recommend?
Names?
Go for it.
Yeah, so we're sort of massive fans of Bike Track. We found that they've got basically the best tech. So they've, rather than just having like a SIM card in their trackers, they use multiple different types of technology, which means that if the bike is underground or in an estate, in a building, you can still get to it. So and I've seen this technology work where there was a bike in a row of garages, and the problem is if you don't have a really precise location, it's impossible to get a warrant. So you can't go to a judge and say, well, look, we'd like to smash down 10 garages because it's in one of those. They'll just tell you to get lost. Whereas the bike track tech, basically, they can say, well, it's in this garage. At a push, it's in one of these 2 garages. But, that's what we use on our bikes, and that's the people we trust. They do kind of a monthly payment where you don't, one of the issues people had was that these devices are kind of 200 to 300 quid. And what they've done as a result of that is that you pay, I can't remember how much you pay per month for X months, but it actually covers the cost of the device as well. So you don't have that initial outlay. So that's, I mean, the tracker is kind of, we always tell people, look, if you buy a cheap one on eBay, and then when that bike gets nicked and you get a replacement, then put a bike track on the replacement and see the difference. Their recovery rate is something like 94%, which is, way higher than kind of the police or anybody else. We try and also encourage people not to get to the point, if you're using the tracker, you're kind of at the point where the bike's already gone. And we always say, well, look, get, layer security. Don't buy anything. I don't want to name a brand that you shouldn't buy, but Abus disc locks are fantastic. Allmax, Pragmasis, those chains are fantastic. And they're, Allmax especially are quite a small business, family-run business. So we use their chains. We tell people you should use these as well. Recently, we've been kind of doing bits and bobs with Xena Security. They do disc locks as well. And they've been pretty supportive in terms of saying, well, look, we'll send you some locks and tell us what you think about them. And we've been pretty impressed so far. We haven't sort of tried them with the angle grinder, but we think they're fairly decent. So again, on our website, we do have like a recommendations page where we try and push the products that we think are good. We don't get any, referral fees. There's no codes that you can use at checkout that give us 20 quid. So we're pretty impartial.
It's all genuine advice.
Yeah, and it's, a lot of the time, the bikes we find have security. So a lot of the thieves will nick a bike and then put security on it because they don't want somebody else. You can't trust anybody nowadays, so they don't want other people to steal it. And we see a lot of locks, disc locks that are, I'll call them cheap disc locks that you buy in most bike shops that are not something like an Abus lock. And, we had one where we contacted the company and we said, look, this alarmed disc lock has got a flaw in it because if you whack it once with a hammer, it kills the alarm and it removes the side of the disc lock, which then provides you perfect leverage to pull the pin out. And they came back saying, we disagree. It's not a flaw. This is a visual deterrent only. It's not a physical security system. And we're talking about a lock here. So I sort of thought, why don't we have community and see what they think? But it's a lot of it is we do try and go to these brands and say, look, we're not asking for you to pay us. Just this is the flaw. Do you not think it's worth fixing this? And to be fair, a lot of the companies are really receptive and they want to get your opinion as to the security products. The problem is you can make a lock impossible to cut, and we've seen this in London recently. They don't cut the disc lock anymore; they just cut the disc because it's much easier to cut through a disc. Yeah, so it's that kind of you're always trying to one up on the guys who are committing the crime, but ultimately, 9 times out of 10. The thing we hear the most is, it was the one day I didn't put a lock on it. And you think, well, your bike's parked in central London every day, and the thieves are out there every day. So every day they see your bike and they go, too much security. And then one day they go, he forgot his lock. Fucking, let's take it. So that's kind of the that one day where you've forgotten your lock is probably the day it will get nicked because they're not stupid. They're not going to sit there and take a massively well-secured bike. They'll just wait and they'll go around and see if there's a less well-secured bike. The stuff I see every day in London, central London, really nice bikes, and they've got a 10 quid disc lock on a 30 grand bike. You think, well, at this point, it's tempting to me almost because it's just you've made no effort in security. And I know that if your disc lock is 5 quid, you haven't forked out 300 for a tracker because your security to use an afterthought. we hear a lot, oh, my bike was parked in a really nice area. And, we try and, without sort of taking the piss out of somebody who's just had something awful happen, we sort of say, well, these guys are not going out and robbing people from estates. They're going out to the nice areas where people have money and have nice bikes. That you don't go and steal bikes from the ghetto, because chances are they're already nicked. You go to the nice central area where a lot of naive people have a lot of money and buy nice bikes. So it's kind of a lot of it is almost sounds like common sense, but it's I think a lot of people just aren't exposed.
Hold on. There's nothing common about common sense, son. There we are. That's
what we're finding, is that we've had thieves. A lot of thieves will swap out number plates, and we had thieves swap out number plates for number plates that belonged to another stolen bike. So they nicked a bike, and they found an identical bike parked up. So they nicked the plates off that and put it on the bike they'd nicked. It turns out they'd taken the plates from another bike that had been nicked. So when you ran a check on the bike, it still came back as stolen. You think, guys, if you're going to do that, at least run a check on the plate, because this is just stupid. So I agree, there is no such thing as common sense. I think it's a lot of the time, it takes me a couple of minutes to secure my bike every day, and it would be pretty difficult for somebody to steal. It'd be an absolute pain in the arse for them to nick it. And it probably isn't the right bike to steal in London, because you'll have me chasing you for the next 6 months until we find the bike. But, a lot of the time, most of these theft can be avoided by just not making it easy. Again, if you have, an S1000RR, maybe a GS 1250, an MT10, a T-Max, then just move out of London, because no matter the security you put on it, they will try and nick it. BMW Park Lane, so they've got this big BMW dealership in central London on Park Lane, and they've got motorcycles in the window, and the S1000RR they have in the window has got 2 disc locks on it, despite the fact that it's behind a massive window. They said, they've been ram raided for it before. So, a lot of the time it's just, if they really want it, they'll have it, but that's not an excuse to make it easy for them.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually speaking to a friend of mine last night, who's he's not from London, he's from down south, but he was telling us about a friend that had recently been in London on a bike and had pulled up at some traffic lights, and a couple of mopeds had pulled either side, and one guy, on the left, was just a single guy in a moped, and on the right was two lads on mopeds, and so he sat on a red light. He was on a CBR 1000 or something, and this guy pulled the second of the passengers pulled it. He looked down, and he was holding a gun at him, and he was obviously trying to get him off. And the lad just dropped the clutch and just went, and he managed to get away from them. But obviously we're from Newcastle, and this type of thing is just, it's so remote from our daily lives. My dad lives in London, so I get a feeling of what it's like, and obviously you see the news and whatever. But is it true that there's such a a moped what's it called, a scandal at the moment, where is this as rife as it seems in the press?
Yeah, I mean, I think the press had a bit of a field day on what I've called moped enabled criminality. So that was, you nick a moped and then you snatch phones, or you nick a moped and you basically just commit thievery, general being a twat. And the thing with that is it has a massive impact. So one stolen moped will be used in 10 snatches, and so it kind of escalates quite quickly, because as soon as they've nicked that bike, they go on a rampage. And there were a couple of really prolific gangs, and since, so there was one gang actually, and I'll give a shout out to the guy. I think he's serving 9 years in jail. So Omar Tafat, if you're listening to this, well done. You're in jail. I hope it's enjoyable. But the main gang behind a lot of this enabled criminality. They were the guys. It was in the news actually a while ago during there was a boat race on the Thames, and they rocked up on T-Maxes and tried to steal the cameras, the BBC cameras that had been fixed to the bridges. That's how brazen they were. And
wow.
So we, and a lot of these guys were nicked. They're in jail, and it's killed that. I think it was something like 60-70% drop instantly once that gang was arrested. And that enabled criminality has dropped a fair amount. What hasn't dropped at all is that they've realised, okay, if I nick this bike and I snatch 10 phones, I make £1,000. But I've got the case, the Op Venice guys are dealing only with that enabled criminality. They're allowed to knock you off your bike. Not really worth the risk. What they'll do instead is say, well, actually, if I just nick bikes, nobody gives a shit. Nobody responds. If you call 999 and say my bike has been stolen, they'll say, why are you calling 999? That sort of approach. So I think a lot of them have understood that a much, much less risky business is just stealing the bikes and then selling them on. But don't go and commit other crime with it, because that means suddenly you escalate it a notch. Whereas if you just stick to nicking bikes, you can go under the radar for quite a long time. So I think there's been a shift, but I think we give the Met a fairly hard time with this, because we know that they do a lot of work to make sure that people equate moped or motorcycle theft with the scandal that happened around moped-enabled crime, because they come out and they really loudly say moped-enabled crime is down 60-70%, because what they want people to think is theft, what pisses us off as a community is down. But actually the motorcycling community care about the theft of the motorbikes, not so much the enabled criminality. That's just general criminality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it, I don't want to come across as kind of, I'm going to go back into my basement and tinfoil hat on after this interview. But, it is something that we see, and we've got fairly credible sources on that. We've got the theft data. We see the number of vehicles that get added to Police National Computer as stolen every day, and it's massive. It's worrying, and it doesn't have the attention that it deserves. You look at every day, you open the news and it's about these cars being stolen with keyless. They're extending the signal of keys, and they're stealing them. But with bikes, there are more bikes stolen than registered as new in the UK. So let that sink in. There are more bikes nicked than new bikes, acquired and put on the road. And a lot of those are, the kind of easy little peds that people nick, and they're easy to hotwire. That's one thing. But a lot of them are big bikes that, bikes nowadays are spending, 6, 7, 8 grand on kind of a sort of average entry level big bike. And they're getting nicked like never before, because they understand that they don't need to hotwire them. People will say, oh, it's got immobilizers, it's got this, it's got that. They pass the immobilizers. The Yamahas, for example, are notorious for if you go on eBay and you type in sort of Yamaha immobilizer emulator, for about 10 quid you get a chip that will start a Yamaha bike without the key. So a lot of these brands, you can bypass the security that's already on the bike, and you don't actually need to start it to steal it, because you break the steering, put it in neutral, and you get your mate on a moped to come next to you. He puts his leg onto your pillion foot peg and pushes you. And it's harder than it sounds. We've tried it, and it's you can do a couple of minutes, but then it starts getting pretty tiring. But that's how they steal them in London. So they don't need to hotwire them. They don't need to start them. They can take them and then take them back to wherever they live and have plenty of time. Once they're happy, it doesn't have a tracker, they've got all the time in the world. So, it's kind of, I don't see it getting much better. What I see right now is that a lot of the gangs are getting wise to the trackers. So, currently, I think it's still, the offer's still on. If you buy a brand new Honda, they will install a data tool tracking system for you. Which is great, it's free of charge. But what that means is that the garage isn't being paid to install it. So they're going to put it in the first place they can think of, which is under the seat. Which means that when your bike does get nicked, the tracker is easy to find. But it also means that these gangs are being more and more exposed to trackers. Trackers work when not everybody has one. If everybody has one, then they'll just start jamming the signal. And we're seeing stuff right now on social media where they're trying to sell, either GPS jammers, but also detectors, so that you don't worry, scan it with this sort of handheld device and it'll tell you if there's a tracker. It's quite entertaining, because some bloke has actually bought a load of these for pennies in China, and he's selling them on social media for 200-300 quid. So they're getting mugged off as they buy them, which is kind of a bit of a silver lining. But
bit of a win.
They're wising up to this. So unless the tactics change, soon, we're going to see a lot of tracked bikes just go missing without a trace. So it's kind of a constantly evolving thing, and it's I think the industry are trying to keep up, but the industry are struggling because you're kind of stuck between do you reduce the thefts? But on the other hand, a lot of the manufacturers, if your bike gets nicked, they'll sell you a second bike. And this problem is a very English problem. You go to mainland Europe and you sit there with your 4 locks putting it on your bike. People will think you're mental. So it's a very English problem. So I think a lot of the manufacturers, their view is, well, why should I make a bike impossible to steal when most countries aren't full of thieving little scroats? So am I going to change the way we make a bike just for the English? Well, we're not that big a market, so it's a bit frustrating because it's kind of a lot of these bikes are almost too easy to steal. Like the little moped. None of the mopeds usually have immobilizers, and all you do is you melt 2 or 3 wires together. You break one panel, and you've got the bike, and you're off. And they see mopeds usually as disposable, so they'll nick a moped, rag it around for a week, normally crash it into something stationary, and then walk off and just leave it. Unfortunately, they never seem to get hurt when they do that, but it's they don't care. That's the problem, is that sort of a massive proportion of the theft statistics could have been avoided had proper security been used. So it's frustrating, but I don't see the numbers improving massively. At a national scale, I think they went down 12-13% this year, but on a London scale, I think it's getting worse. We're just kind of not really making a big fuss when those figures are reported. So we are planning, we're kind of hoping at some point in the near future is to get freedom of information requests in for all the boroughs in London and kind of publicise the theft numbers and what's actually happening with theft, so that people kind of assess for themselves whether they think that it's reducing or not. We've been trying to kind of speak to the candidates for Mayor of London and say, look, you go around, you tell us you're going to be tough on crime, but what's your actual plan to stop motorcycle theft in London? There's a lot of bikers in London who want to hear what you've got to say, and none of them will even acknowledge us. They'll just kind of say, well, it's no comment, and
it's crazy that, because it could be such an easy win as well for you could end up getting a lot of voters for if you just came out with something. I mean, like some plan. You'd be beating all the rest of them, wouldn't you? So,
but that's the thing. I mean, right now I think as bikers we kind of suffer from this image that we're all sort of scum. I say there's no politician really that's a biker, but apparently Boris Johnson's got he's got a dirt bike now, so he might suddenly start being an avid biker. I doubt it, but maybe. But it's that kind of we're not really. I think we do still suffer from a lot of people going, well, A, I don't like bikers, and B, well, they should have insurance and it should just cover it. And I think the thefts have suffered for a long time from the fact that people have just said, well, they see it as an insured loss, but it isn't. When I look at how much I pay in insurance for my bike and kind of my deductible and things like that, I just think I couldn't afford to have it nicked. Even if the insurance paid out, I'd be down kind of $3,000 before it even starts. So it's painful. We're pricing people out from owning a bike in London. You get an 18-year-old to go, I want to buy a CBF 125. It's got the horsepower for a lawnmower, and they're paying $2,000 insurance a year because it's going to get nicked. You think we're not really protecting people that want to come into biking and become bikers, because they'll just go, well, it's too expensive and not do it. So I think we've all got a sort of small part to play. I think the police should be doing more. I think politicians it should be a political problem. It should be a sort of crisis in terms of how we're going to resolve this, because it is a uniquely English problem. I was in mainland Europe a few weeks ago, and the amount of bikes, I was actually told by the people I was with that I need to calm down, because every time I walked past a bike, I thought, that's dodgy. There's no security on it. Run a check. Oh, that doesn't happen here, actually. Snap out of it. But it's something that we need to resolve, but I'm not entirely sure what the actual solution is. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'm just looking at the time there, and the time's motoring on, so I think we'll wrap the interview up. And I would just say it's like such a massive thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate your time. Are you a fan of the race, and do you follow like any of the BSB or the Isle of Man TT or anything?
No,
Too
not
busy
well.
catching criminals, man.
Yeah,
He's too
exactly,
busy catching criminals.
exactly. You know,
Batman and Robin have full-time jobs.
That's the thing. You know, I'd rather ride the bike than watch other people ride their bikes. But no, I'll put the podcast on next time we're in the van, and we'll give it a listen and go from there. But the racing is not. If we had time, we would. So maybe one day.
Oh,
but
well,
no, thanks for talking.
If you're free any time around, we race down at Brands Hatch and Silverstone, Thruxton, those are the sort of southern tracks. If you fancy a day out at the BSB, just drop us a message and I'll sort you a couple of tickets out.
And it's full of stolen parts. The BSB
Well,
paddock.
exactly.
So
And mopeds, apparently. And
just bring your clipboard, Joggen. Bring your clipboard.
Bring my high-vis jacket, yeah.
But yeah, best of luck with all the recoveries, and hope we'll catch up sometime soon. But yeah, thanks for coming on, and catch up soon.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Have a nice
mate.
evening, guys. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
So I really enjoyed that, you know, something totally different compared to, you know, from what we've done in the past. But
And don't judge a book by its cover.
do you know, I added that page when my bike got nicked at Brands Hatch, my paddock bike, and I think I'd sent them a message just to let them know.
Did they get it back for you, or did they?
No,
just
it got nicked and then just burnt out the next,
Aye.
like straight away. So unfortunately, they didn't.
I
have
reckon it
time.
was Richard Cooper, but let's not. Let's not accuse things, but it was definitely Richard Cooper.
But so
small man. Come on, Chrissy, pull yourself together. Come on, we've got a podcast here.
I was going to say,
it was great. It was absolutely meant to have them on, and like all seriousness, I did not expect the voice coming out their mouths. It was only one. It was only one. Like the other guy must be that hard. He can't even give his voice away. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
But like I say, what they've been doing, and like 200 bikes, did they say they've
That
recovered?
is
If you think,
serious,
if you average them out at like, you know, a couple of grand each, it's some serious money if you think about it.
They weren't like, you know, when you first portrayed, because obviously you would explain your situation with the PEDs and everything like that. I was kind of expecting just like, little 125s, little commuter bikes, everything like that. They were talking some high end bikes, seriously high end bikes, and it was absolutely great. And hey, keep up the good work. You know, these Batman and Robin there, because we can't give out their real names. You're doing an outstanding job, and it was absolutely great for them to get them on the show, Chrissy. Good stuff, my man. Good stuff.
Just before we hang up, I just want, we've had a few more reviews on the old iTunes.
If they're not 5-star, get bent.
Yeah, no, I've got a few 5-star ones. So we've had one from Pete, Muzz. Absolutely brilliant. Amazing podcast. Great crack. Only just started listening last week, so going through from episode 1 onwards. Love bike racing, and especially the TT. Will be out there again this year. Keep it up, lads, with a thumbs up emoji. And then we've just had one very recently from BMX 3000. Must listen. 5-star review. It says, chasing the racing is not only a must listen for all bike and racing enthusiasts, it's also a great entertainment for non-bikers. My wife loves listening and she doesn't like much.
Wow. She doesn't.
Dom and Chrissy are great hosts, and as racers themselves, their interview questions are bang on what we want to ask ourselves. 5-star doesn't do it justice. Keep up the good work, young'uns. How about that, eh?
Have you wrote these? I bet it's Piggy. That's wrote these. We haven't spoke to him. How is that little hay bale with feet?
He's doing spot on. He's actually picking me helmet up tonight because I've just had it painted from KW Paints down in Doncaster, just down the road from Piggy. So obviously flying out to Spain tomorrow, straight after work, and me and the piglet.
Nice.
And we've got 4 days down at Cartagena in Spain testing. I absolutely cannot wait to get out.
See what that track is like for yourself, because obviously a few months ago we were like, it's just been painted and it's pretty horrible. So let me know, son.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated on it. I've spoke to a few lads that have been out there recently, and they've.
It's definitely improving.
I think
it's definitely improving. Yeah.
But yeah, all good. What about yourself? Anything good in the pipeline? What about tomorrow? I'm
not getting married. Oh, Bennett, no. It's my birthday tomorrow. So you know how I'm treating myself.
Go on.
Cutting trees at work. So no, I've got
how many candles is on the cake this year,
mate? You're the maths teacher. I can't count. So there we go. So no, it's No, I'm dying to get out on a bike now, because thing is, I'm like the kid in detention. Everyone else is out playing, having a great time, and to be honest, I'm going to be very honest with you, it gets under my skin a bit, because you think everyone else is ahead of you, and it's just like, oh, geez, like yourself, everyone's going out and everyone's doing this, and you almost become, well, I feel very, well, the only term I can use is sheepish, because you think, oh, I want to do that, I want to do that, because all the road riders, even everyone else has been like Califat. You ever been there?
No,
mate. Like JB Cowd's out there, Craig Neve, Rob Hodgson, who's the new RC Express rider. It's and there's loads.
Is he in your leathers?
No, the cheeky little git. They are. So it's it's not just everyone's out and about. But no, I'm very, very hopeful that we'll get on a bike very soon.
I've got Daytona sent us a little message. They've got me boots on. Well, they've made up my boots, so they'll be getting shipped out soon. So I cannot wait to get them.
Fantastic.
Obviously, picking my first helmet up. Well, Piggy's picking it up tonight
Mint.
as we record this, and my leathers are on the way from RST. They're not going to be ready for testing, unfortunately, but so I'll be in me chasing the racing leathers.
Good man.
But,
Good man.
A bit of branding.
Plenty of wheelies, young'un. Plenty of wheelies.
But I cannot wait to get my RST this year, because for the first year in my career with using airbags, and I'm really obviously I'm not looking forward to setting them off, but I am looking forward to trying the technology, and it's something new, exciting, and I think it's a massive step forward in terms of safety. So I'm really pleased that I've decided to upgrade the leathers, and I think the system. Obviously, I'll be able to talk about it more in depth once I get the system sorted.
Without trying them.
Yeah.
Are you
getting the airbag system?
Nah.
No. Any particular reason?
Obviously the technology's there, but it's I'd like to see it used more, because obviously they have developed it. These people are like, it's a big company, big brand. They're not just going to release it and go, and let's see what happens. Obviously it's been tested time and time again, but I like to see the best way to test a tool is give it to an idiot, and you're not going to find a better bunch of idiots than motorcycle racers, are you? So actually release the product out there first and just see how it copes, it develops.
What's your reservations about it?
Reservations about it.
Are you worried about it like setting off when you haven't crashed or something?
No, exactly. That's exactly it. You know what I mean? And the thing is, I haven't seen the product. I haven't seen it up close. They haven't described what it does, what its capability is. What the tolerances are with it.
You need to get on the phone to Zoe. She'll give you the full talk.
God, I'm busy, man. I'm busy, youngin. Busy. I know. I need to be. To be honest, my New Year's resolution.
What's that? Less busy.
Yeah, well, I want to focus on my racing a bit more, and I think it's only fair, because I'm getting a lot more support, and I need to do that. But the problem is when I'm bred to work, young'un. Bred to work. Look at these hands.
What you giving up for Lent? Working 7 days a week.
Pretty much, there we are. That's what I'm going to do for Lent. There you are. That's what I'm going to do for Lent. Stop working 7 days a week. So obviously, once the season gets going, we've got I just keep thinking summer, and I work 7 days a week, because I'm thinking, well, if I work today, it makes up for the day I've lost.
The TT.
And to be honest, I'm soft as a brush, man. It's because people go, oh, can you help us? And I go, yeah. It's, believe it or not, people, need superheroes like us, Chrissy. People who can cut down trees. It's a much desired thing. Obviously, it's obviously not as important teaching the future race. Like obviously how to count.
Have you got any testing planned in?
Nah,
nothing yet.
Nah. So
hopefully some news on that sometime soon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's it's a case of, that's what I really like about the Davies team. It's a bit like, look, we can't give you a plan because we're still currently working on the plan, and that's totally fair enough. They're not filling me full of shit, and they're not going, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. It's like, I was down there the other day, obviously dropping off parts, picking things up. My mate's built the engine up, refreshed that, and you think, I can see the plans develop, and they're very open. But at the moment, it's in, and it's getting built, so there's no point planning anything until we've got a bike built.
Spot on. So, and is there any more updates on the 130 Club? How's getting the merchandise sorted and all that type of stuff?
I'm using a company called Screen Monkey that I found on Instagram. They're based in Killingworth, which is just like, what's that, 30 odd minutes away. Mm-hmm. So that's currently getting sorted. I'm honestly unbelievably grateful for the support, and it goes a huge way, absolutely huge way. points make prizes and money gets trophies. That's the truth of it. And obviously, without the support from friends, family, and sponsors, and obviously the 130 Club and everyone, and even this podcast, Chris. You think about the patrons. They're keeping us going, keeping all the gear going. And obviously, we can't. We're very lucky people. We're very lucky people.
Speaking of
Chris.
that,
we've got a lot of people helping us.
Speaking of that, the trailer should be, getting on.
All right.
Getting on over the next few weeks. So hopefully we'll be able to pick that up soon and get our first interview. We've got some good guests lined up for over the next sort of month or two. And
we'll have to get penciled in.
Just for anybody that's listening, maybe who hasn't listened to the previous ones, do you want to just give a quick, brief description of what the 130 Club is?
The 130 Club. So last year I achieved a 129.5 lap.
That's average
speed around a 37-mile lap. It's a case of a dream for me that I thought I'd never ever remotely get near when I first got a motorcycle. I just wanted to race a TT. Never what I thought getting to them lap speeds that my heroes have achieved is like it was just a pipe dream. But obviously, to get to that speed, it's marginal. But like more testing and the more like time I spend on the bike and everything, and that costs money. And obviously, with the support from that. From the 130 Club, we're going to take that next step. And what you get with the 130 Club is you get hats, hoodies, T-shirts, prizes, raffles, and you become one of the 130 members of it. So £130 gets you into this club. Now, I say this every time on the pod, it's a lot of money. It really is a lot of money. And the people who are supporting us already, I cannot thank you enough. But it really does make a difference. And yeah. So that's the crack.
We were just saying just before the podcast started, there's a buzz in the air this time of year.
We're actually getting back to our jobs, talking about racing.
It's such a good time of year, so exciting. New colours, new teams, new back riders. But there's that buzz. Like this racing season is almost here for us in the UK, and just absolutely cannot wait to get started. So I think that wraps us up. Massive thanks to our patrons as usual, and we didn't have a sponsor for this episode, but I'm sure we'll get one sorted for next one.
Get a Spanish one. When you're out there, son. But anyway, because good luck out there, son.
Thanks very much, mate.
Rubber side down, skids and wheelies, chicks dig it. Fact.
On that note, I'll see you next week, mate.
See you in a bit, son.